Advanced Certificate in Senior Primary Education, Social Science, Module 2, Subject Code ACP-SSC12. This is a contact session. I am Miss Hermina E. Smith. I would like to invite and welcome all registered students for the above mentioned course to this presentation. The aim of this presentation is to prepare you all for the upcoming August examinations 2017 and also as a general informative session concerning our or your registered course. General objectives of this course is as follows. Number 1, to analyze features, processes, and impact of plate tectonics, earthquakes, and volcanoes. While we are looking at this objective, we are having plates that are caused to move by plate boundaries which are moving in certain directions. These movements are causing earthquakes and volcanoes, for instance. These types are also causing different types of other landforms to be created. Also, can earthquakes and volcanoes have different types of impacts onto us? It can have negative impacts, for instance, and then positive impacts, which are also the volcanoes. One needs to know also, under looking at the plate tectonics, other types which are also fault mountains that are created because of the movement of plates. Let's look at the second objective. Discuss features, processes, and impacts of formation of land and marine forms. So under this, you find different types of processes. You can have the river processes, marine processes, and the wind processes. Under the river processes, marine and wind processes, you have other 3 processes that are taking place in each of these actions. So you are looking at erosion, transporting, and deposition in each of the previously named processes. These erosion, transportation, and deposition are creating landforms. These landforms are in each of them. For instance, when we look at river processes, a landform that will be created through erosion could be a river cliff, for instance. It could be a gorge. It could be a waterfall. It could be interlocking spurs. So many other landforms that are created through these processes of erosion, transporting, and deposition. Students need to go through all of the information in their study guides regarding this objective and this topic to understand better when you are facing questions. Number 3 objective is to explain the availability of water and the features of natural regions. So when we are looking at natural regions, we look at regions which are climatic regions such as the tropical savanna, tropical desert, tropical rainforest, Mediterranean areas. Number 4, we go on to atmospheric processes and the measuring of weather. Objective number 5, students need to discuss the features, importance, and management of energy resources. Then at objective number 6, you need to analyze and interpret topographical maps and other forms of presented geographical data. Now it is very important when you are looking at the interpretation of the topographical maps, because mostly learners, if they do not grasp it, or understand it from the beginning, it is very difficult for them to be able to read such maps. So the work of the teacher, or the duty of the teacher, to make them understand as from the word go what a topographical map is. They should be able to see it, learners should be able to read it, and different other skills the learner should be able to apply onto the map. When we look at topographical maps, in general, each of them are having references or map keys. Then, the learners, for instance, need to know when they are looking at topographical maps at the location or coordinations of places that are on the maps. Learners need to be able to identify directions on the map. They need to, for instance, look at settlements and different types of settlements on the map, and also the services that are, for example, given in the settlement. Other geographical data must also be looked at. For instance, graphs, how to read graphs, how to draw graphs, how to get information from graphs, how to look at graphs as well. Then there are tables, how to read from tables, get information from tables, and pictures, and so on. Then we look at the next objective, and that again is one of what I was talking now before, to explain and apply geographical inquiry skills as well. At number 8, it is important for students to discuss the features of population dynamics, distribution and density, and the socio-economic impact of HIV/AIDS. So under geography or population geography, its distribution and density, it is very important to know the movement of people, because that contributes to how people are distributed and the density of people at certain areas. Then, with the impact of HIV/AIDS, you need to understand what HIV stands for, what AIDS stands for, so that you can be able to explain to the learners the difference between the two. Also need the learners to know what are the economic impacts that this disease will have on a country, for example, Namibia. There are also other factors that are influenced through HIV/AIDS. You look at work situations, you look at the learners, or the children that become orphans just because of the passing of perhaps the parents, one of the parents or both the parents, through this disease. And one needs to know what are the impacts that these orphans will then have, or the effects they will have, and also the people that are looking after such children without parents. Right, now we move on to the next objective, which is the features of, or how to discuss features of, or factors influencing the problems of urban and rural settlements. Now, first of all, you need to know the difference between rural and urban settlements. So urban settlements usually refer to towns, cities, whereas rural settlements will refer to villages, farms, and so on. Right. Under urban settlement, for instance, you have to look at the urban morphology. Urban zones that you find in urban areas like cities, for instance. Every urban zone, urban area will have a different type of model that you will look at. This model consists of the different types of areas that this model will, or this city will exist of. For instance, you find the CBD, which is the Central Business District. You find the transition zone, different types of residential areas. You find the high income area. You find the middle income residential area. Then you do find the low income residential area. While we are at residential areas, for instance, you can look at informal settlements that are created. Why are informal settlements created? Learners need to know. Why are people moving to informal settlements? What are the problems that people in informal settlements are facing as well? Right? Then there are other areas in urban cities and so on. You look at industrial areas, and then any city or any town needs to have also its open spaces. These open spaces generally are the areas where you do find playgrounds, where you find parks that people are relaxing in, and so on. Okay, we go back to our objectives, and then the next one is that students should explain agricultural systems and food production issues, very importantly, right? The next one is about discussing the types and influence of different industrial systems on socio-economic development. In geography, it is mostly needed that the Namibian child would need to know about the industrial system, which is the fishing industry. We have other types of industries also in Namibia, but then the fishing industry is the one that is more focused on in our syllabi when we come to teaching. So the learner must know the primary sector of it, secondary sector of it, and then the tertiary sector of it, how the process goes from where the fish was in the water up to where it will plow back or give back money. Right, we look at the next objective. Discuss the nature, growth and importance of leisure and tourism industry. As a country that we know that is rich in our tourist industry or tourism industry, it is important for the learner to know what tourism means to our country as well. Leisure. Learners do not understand the terminology leisure, so therefore teachers need to explain and give more examples so that learners can clearly get what leisure is all about. But for both of them, it needs to also be explained to the learners why they are important two industries that one should look into. We go on with our next objective again. Explain the causes of the collapse of international peace by 1939. You have to discuss the Weimar Republic and the Nazi party rule of Germany between the years of 1934 and 1945. Right, we go on to the next objective. Discuss aspects of the history of the USA between 1914 and 1941. Then also, students need to discuss and apply skills for historians as well. There are different types of skills that are also needed as historians, so you need to go in. It is also, you could also find it in your modules, very nicely stipulated in your modules, so please go through that as well. The last one, very importantly, once again, you have to discuss the aspects of teaching methodology in the above mentioned subjects, which is geography and history under social sciences. We look at some of the teaching methodologies. As a social science teacher, it is important to use the appropriate type of teaching methodology when teaching subjects like geography and history, simply for the better understanding of these subjects by learners. When planning for a lesson, a social science teacher must also use practical or investigative methods to help learners visualize given topics that are not in their physical surroundings, also to enhance the different skills learners need to master these subjects. Successful lessons are usually learner-centered. Therefore, teachers need to know the characteristics of learner-centered teaching and try to find different ways on how to prepare for such lessons. Assessment of learners is also vital. Therefore, regular tests, practical exercises, term end examinations, and so forth must be given to learners to know the level of understanding and competence of learners. Teachers must then interpret such test or examination scores to have a view of learning difficulties of learners. Now let's look at how we will prepare ourselves for the examinations. Examination instructions need to be adhered to. Therefore, carefully read your general instructions as well as instructions given at each question or sub-question to clearly understand what is needed to be done and to score good marks. The duration of your examination will be 3 hours. The total marks for your examination will be 130 marks. The examination will consist of general methodology of teaching in social science classrooms. So students, you need to prepare yourself and go through all types of methodology that you can use where you are teaching social science subjects. Subject content questions will be asked. Therefore, read and study your modules and given study material to gather the necessary knowledge. Herewith, I wish you luck for your upcoming examinations. I thank you.